Greetings, this is the Helpful Art Teacher, and I'm here today to talk about creating a thumbnail sketch and then inking it in. So in my previous video, I went over quite extensively how to create a thumbnail sketch. In this video, I'm going to talk about inking. So when you ink, do not just outline exactly what you drew there. Remember, your thumbnail sketch was intentionally sloppy and quick, and it was just there to put all the elements in place. When you ink, that's when you're going to be putting in quite a lot of detail. So again, you're not going to just trace over the lines you drew. You're going to reference the original photograph. So have it handy and really zoom in and look at the details. Remember, you now have the leisure to add um, exquisite detail to your ink drawing because you don't have to worry about getting the proportions wrong or the placement on the page wrong. And now you can focus on the details. So don't blow that opportunity. When you use a line, pay attention to the direction of the line. You're not merely coloring in like you're coloring in a coloring book. You're adding texture. So you're going to pay attention to the direction of the line and also the weight of the line. So thicker lines closer together will create shadows, thinner lines farther apart will create lighter areas, and lines in general will create texture. When I inked in the darkest part of the B, I actually was drawing very cognizant of the direction of the lines so that it actually looked like the fuzz on the bee's back. I didn't just color in a black area to make it a black area. I colored in a black area to make it look a certain texture. Imagine yourself touching the center of the flower. How would it feel? How would the bumps in the center of the flower feel? How would the petals feel? How would the fuzz on the bee feel? How would the texture, the papery texture of the wings feel? So you have to keep in mind that lines express how something would feel if you touched it, and that the direction of the lines are very important. I notice that my lines tend to on the flower petals tend to radiate out from the middle. So, and that I used both thinner and thicker lines depending on what I was creating. So now we're going to go on to this aerial view of this bridge. And one of the things you're going to notice is that I initially made a few mistakes in the top of the two towers at the beginning. The angle is slightly off on the top of the towers. Again, a thumbnail sketch is just there to establish composition. So those mistakes should be corrected later during inking. So if you're just tracing over your lines, you're missing a huge opportunity. So notice I erased them and I changed the angle of the tops of the towers prior to inking them in. I don't just trace over my lines. So in this case, I'm actually correcting the perspective and proportions as I go. It wasn't that important when I was doing the thumbnail sketch, but it becomes important prior to inking that corrections are made. So always make sure that you have the original photo in front of you when you're inking. Don't miss a chance to correct errors. The other thing is that you can add in additional detail when you're inking. For instance, I added in the lights and I added the shadows underneath the bridge that weren't there in the original thumbnail sketch. For this one, I made several errors in the placement of the knee and the placement of the hands. So those errors get to be fixed when I go ahead and do the angle of one of the knees is incorrect. So those errors get to be fixed when I do the inking. Because I have the original in front of me, I'm able to take a second look And I'm going to notice in the light of day after several hours break from this drawing all the little things that I can fix. So pencils come with erasers because people make mistakes, and you'd be foolish not to take advantage of that. I know a lot of our teachers discourage erasing, but as long as it's done thoughtfully and intentionally, I really think that it's very necessary for an illustrator to make liberal use of an eraser, and that's why we lightly sketch first and then come back to our work later. So you can see one of the knees is placed at a completely incorrect angle, and I'm going to correct it right now before I ink it in. Now I know what the correct angle is, I'm going to change it. So it looks like she's wearing a jacket around her waist, but I'm going to take creative license and put a shoe there. For this suspension bridge, this is a worm's eye view or upshot of the Manhattan Bridge. But looking up, I made a huge error at the top because I tried to fit the top tower into my picture rather than just letting it go off the page. So I didn't notice that until the next day when I came back to ink it, and you'll see that I make those corrections when I go ahead and ink it. So I squish the top tower in. It's too short. It should go off the edge of the page. Instead, it's kind of compressed in there. So I'm going to come back the next day to ink it, and I'm going to see that it's bothering my eyes, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase that part and just make it go right off the edge of the paper. So waiting a day or at least a few hours between penciling and inking a thumbnail sketch is a very wise approach. The other thing you're going to notice is this suspension bridge, but I didn't put in any of the suspension cables when I made the thumbnail because the thumbnail, the objective is basically to establish the composition. So now that I'm inking it in, I'm starting to see all sorts of additional details that I can add, and it's easy enough to add them with a pen, even though I didn't draw them first because the other stuff is in place. So I can look at the original photo and I know exactly where to add the additional details. I can also add in, I don't know if I did, but I could easily add in shading. The bottom of there's my suspension cables, and the bottom of the bridge might be slightly darker. I could have added in a little bit of shading as well. I'm not done yet, but this is what my work looks like so far, and you can see that I have added in text balloons with the explaining what the camera angles are.